Welcome to the Weather Insights briefing. I'm meteorologist Scott Pitney along with meteorologist Jeff Lindner, and we are tracking now Hurricane Ernesto. The latest advisory just came out from the National Hurricane Center here just shortly after 10:30 Central Time, and this is August 14th. And Jeff, this Ernesto, now Hurricane Ernesto, even though the center's quite a bit north of Puerto Rico already, still bringing a lot of rain to Puerto Rico, the Lesser Antilles, the Virgin Islands. Some of the rainfall reports there in Puerto Rico, anywhere from a half a foot to almost 10 inches. Of course, being a mountainous area, those rainfall amounts can be exacerbated by the terrain that they have there, but it is not done with the rain. But now we are focusing our attention on Ernesto turning north and becoming a major hurricane later in the week, tracking towards Bermuda. And yesterday, the track showing a direct track toward Bermuda. Now it's shifted to the west a little bit. And as far as U.S. impacts, high surf, high tides along the eastern seaboard's about it. But mostly, this is something for Bermuda to be watching out for.
Yeah, I mean, this is a fairly straightforward Western Atlantic hurricane with a trough on the U.S. East Coast, so bringing it northward away from the Caribbean in the general vicinity of Bermuda. We'll see if it gets as close as it looks right now. It could shift a little bit more to the west. It could shift a little bit more to the east. Bermuda is relatively hurricane savvy. They have really strict building codes there, so they're no stranger to big hurricanes. And this is interestingly enough forecast not to be a major hurricane up through this area. We'll
Yeah.
see. Kind of surprising conditions are generally pretty favorable up through here, but the storm looks like it grows in size as it moves northward, and sometimes those bigger wind-filled hurricanes aren't necessarily near as strong. They produce impacts over a big area, but they're not as strong. And that type of size of a hurricane out here in the Western Atlantic is definitely going to produce big swells and significant rip currents along the entire U.S. coast by this weekend. So from Maine all the way down to Florida, there's going to be some issues with rip currents on the U.S. East Coast, and so be mindful of that. Behind this big trough here on the U.S. East Coast, this is actually some pretty fair weather, decently cool weather for the
Yeah.
northeast and east coast right now. And you can see this front kind of the trough in the front kind of dipping down here now. This is what's going to steer barrel to the north and then eventually off to the northeast. And you can see, looking at the rest of the basin, not a whole lot going on. Quiet in the Gulf of Mexico, quiet in the Caribbean. We got this little tropical wave here around 50 west that's attempting to produce a little bit of thunderstorm activity. Not a whole lot with it. You can see this area here off the coast of Africa continues to be relatively stable. Some dry air, some sinking air, and so these waves are kind of struggling in this region here. We'll see as this meanders off to the west if it can find a little bit favorable conditions in the Caribbean. And then a pretty big wave here about to exit the coast of Africa. But just like what we've seen over the past week or so, the models really don't do anything with this. It kind of succumbs to the dry air and stable conditions there in the Atlantic basin. We'll see how this progresses off to the west. But really, for the next 5 to 7 days, maybe even the next 10 days, not looking at any significant tropical development in the Atlantic basin. Kind of unusual for the month of August here in mid-August. This is typically when we start to see activity ramp up. And I'm not 100% sure that the models are the right idea here. There could be something that tries to spin up in some location in the Atlantic, especially here with this kind of trough and boundary that's going to be lingering here,
Yeah.
especially the Northeast Gulf and off the southeast U.S. coast. As Ernesto gets up and out of here, we'll have to kind of watch this area here for possibly something to try to develop along that old decaying frontal boundary as we get into next week or 7 to 10 days out from now. But for right now, relatively quiet in the tropics.
Yeah, and you go back to Alicia in '83, and that formed in the Gulf, I think, the third week of August, and that was from one of the stalled boundary systems out there, and we can have those quick spin ups, and models really don't pick that up. So it's a good idea to check back on the Tropical Forecast Daily, and you can do that right here by subscribing to the Weather Insights YouTube channel, be sure to click on the notifications button so that you will get the latest on what's going on in the tropics. And we will see you on the next Weather Insights briefing. Jeff, thank you very much.